Through our work, we have the distinct pleasure of meeting supervisors and managers of every stripe, including of different strengths, aptitudes, and levels of experience. A common aspect that many supervisors wrestle with for themselves is how to encourage employees to honor the required professional boundaries of the relationship, and how to influence employees to afford deference to their position of authority over their team. Often, supervisors go down a path of creating a defensive shell around themselves, taking the form of a persona. And this persona is the tool adopted to infuse a stance. A stance machinated specifically to dissuade members of their team from challenging their authority. That being the goal, there is a conscious decision to create a persona that projects dominance, strength, and deliberately or not, fear. In almost every case, such contrived persona are void of a willingness to be authentic and vulnerable with one's team, something necessary to develop trust. Under this scheme, assertiveness may possibly be interpreted as aggression. Or, put more plainly, some supervisors, in playing their part, in fact behave aggressively as opposed to assertively, whether they know it or not. What is happening in this circumstance, in crafting this persona, the supervisor is often making his or her choice in terms of whether it is better to be feared than loved. I'm Sam Kemble of Workforce Delivery, Inc. Thank you for joining us. Today we will revisit this classic question, albeit within the context of performance management. Is it better to be feared than loved? Perhaps the most prolific author cited for the phrase, "Is it better to be feared than loved?" is Machiavelli, as cited in The Prince. Before we go too far down into that specific quote and chapter, we note The Prince, even after all these years, has some measure of controversy among academics in terms of whether that writing is the most accurate account of Machiavelli's perspectives. When the Medici family came into power in Florence, Machiavelli lost his position in civil service, and some believe The Prince was in a sense a job application in which he was courting members of the Medici family to gain his position back within the bureaucracy. For certain of Machiavelli's more audacious statements found in The Prince, I tend to take them with a grain of salt, as I believe he was speaking to a more specific audience. At the beginning of that chapter, Machiavelli starts off by saying that leaders must be considered merciful and not cruel. And what is often omitted in the quoted statement is the portion that follows after the comma, which changes significantly the meaning of the sentence. The more fulsome quote is, "It is better to be feared than loved, comma, if you cannot be both." If you cannot be both. No, Machiavelli did not give a blank check permission to even the most pragmatic supervisors and managers to be cruel towards and feared by their team. In surveys, employers describe some of the traits most desired in their employees. This is not the entire list. I have reduced it to those behaviors reliant on a certain level of cognitive functioning, for a reason that will soon become apparent. Among other things, employers want employees to know their strengths, employees that can think independently, solve problems, be innovative, be proactive, and willing to learn new things. The stereotypical Machiavellian approach to supervision presumably leads through fear, to lead through fear. It creates an atmosphere lacking in psychological safety. Employees put into a workplace that lacks psychological safety are more prone to experience a fight or flight reaction and may enter a state of hypervigilance, all of which can impair higher level cognitive functioning. Instinctively, they are more on the lookout for saber-toothed tigers than finding solutions to overcome the organization's challenges. This would suggest that in many situations, having supervisors and managers lead through fear is contrary to the interests of the organization. We at Workforce Delivery throw out a challenge. Test our own leadership style. Consider whether there are improvements that we could make and decide what and how we might transition towards those improvements. Thank you for your time and have a safe and enriching day.